For years now, I've been wanting to build some LEGO mosaics of my two pets, Maddy and Dexter. Maddy here is my cat, who is unfortunately no longer with us, and Dexter here is my dog. Despite wanting to build this extra special tribute for my pets, I've just honestly never found the time or the money or the resources to actually order that many parts and build these mosaics. That is until I saw the LEGO Mosaic Maker come on sale during LEGO's most recent VIP days. So I first built the LEGO Mosaic Maker set back in March 2022 when I traveled to New York City, and I created one at the Mosaic Maker. After building this set once, I knew this would be perfect for the project, so I made sure I snapped up a few copies during the sale and got ready to build. While I waited for those sets to arrive in the mail, I had to select the images of my pets that I wanted to use for the mosaic. This took a lot of time going through my archives and old hard drives trying to find the perfect pictures of my cat and dog. I finally narrowed down my selections, and then I had to do some creative photoshopping skills to remove backgrounds, people, and modify the colors to make it best for the mosaics. Fun fact, for the photo I ended up using of Dexter, I even had to Photoshop a second ear in for him. After finalizing these photos, I uploaded them to the LEGO Mosaic Maker's website to adjust the cropping, the colors, and the contrast. They really do give you a lot of options to choose from. Once the images were selected, it was actually time to get building. At first, I didn't even need to open the second or third copy of the Mosaic Maker at the beginning, since I was actually able to use a bunch of the leftover parts from my personal copy of myself from when I visited New York City. The first pet I wanted to start building was my cat, Maddy. He's actually the pet who inspired this whole project, because when I first learned that he was sick, I knew I wanted to have something in my LEGO collection to always be able to remember him by. The build of Maddy started out pretty productive. I was following LEGO's outline and modifying the colors as I saw accordingly. As I continued building, however, I wasn't really liking how the build was shaping up, so I started to stray a little bit more from the reference images on certain parts like his eyes and his body. I kept working on the actual model of the cat, getting nearly all the way there. Despite the fact that I wasn't actually loving how it was looking, I still started filling in all the yellow background anyways. At this point in the project, I've already spent a few hours building Maddy, but as I sat back and looked at the model a little bit more closely, I couldn't shake the feeling that my cat was looking just a little too animated and cartoony than I was actually hoping he'd look. I mean, it looks like a cat, it just didn't look like my cat, and I think that's because I had made a ton of adjustments and modifications and strayed up a bit too far from the reference image. Since Maddy wasn't quite looking right, I decided I'd pause working on him and actually start working on Dexter to see how his would go. Dexter's build was a lot easier and a speedy process. Right off the bat, I followed the reference image just a bit more closely, and then I could tell it was working to my advantage. At first, I was attempting not to include any yellow in the image because I wanted to save it for the background, but because Dexter does have some tan fur, I decided that yellow was unavoidable, and it did give him a much more detailed look. As I continued building, I became happier and happier with how it was looking, especially how detailed and lifelike that it looked. Once I finished Dexter, I compared him to Maddy, and it was honestly like comparing apples to oranges, comparing how realistic Dexter's look and how cartoony Maddy's look. So much to my disappointment, I spent the next hour removing all the one-by-one plates that I already spent hours laying down on this base plate. I guess you could say that's the beauty of LEGO though. You can constantly build and rebuild, no matter how long it takes. Once I began with a pretty much clean base plate, I actually modified Maddy's reference image a little and actually got to work. This time I went back and forth between a few reference images I had created just to ensure that I could get it right. After a few more hours of building, as you guys can tell, the second attempt at Maddy looked so much better than the first. I think this just really contributes to the fact that I zoomed in on the reference image a little bit more and actually followed it a bit more closely and didn't modify the colors as much. It was challenging at the beginning, but as I kept building, I became happier and happier with the results, and as you guys can tell from the final project, it really does look much better than the image I had created before. So after putting in Maddy and Dexter side by side and comparing them, I definitely decided that I was thrilled with how they turned out, and I actually felt comfortable filling in the rest of the background. At this point, I had only used parts from the two Mosaic Maker sets, but I did eventually have to open up the third to get a bit more yellow. However, the rest of the pieces are untouched for a future mosaic. Once I had finally finished building the two LEGO mosaics and added the very last plate, I was truly thrilled with how the build process went. Despite my initial hesitations and the disappointment with the first model of Maddy, I really think these turned out exactly how I was picturing them, and I'm really happy about it. The final thing I could do before I could call this project complete was to actually hang these LEGO mosaics on my wall with the rest of my LEGO art sets. I just used some command strips on the back of the frames and then climbed up on the ladder and put them in place. I wanted to cheap out and only use double-sided tape, but I'd be forever furious if I used double-sided tape and it didn't hold up and ended up falling and breaking these sets on the way down, because I certainly don't want to have to rebuild them again. Throughout this process, I sort of wish I would have filmed the entire build process of these two LEGO mosaics so I knew exactly how much time I spent building, but the answer is definitely hours, especially with all the building, rebuilding, deconstructing. Boy oh boy, it was a lot of building, and these brick separators are great, but boy are my fingers ever sore. Overall, I'd really have to say this project was a lot of fun to tackle. It's pretty amazing when building with LEGO to see just how things can come to life with just a few thousand bricks, and it's also pretty wild to see the difference between the two images of my cat Maddy from before and after, using roughly the exact same parts, but how polar opposite these images were. This was one of my first times ever building a LEGO mosaic, and although I just used a set and a reference image from the LEGO website, I do think it's just the beginning of more for me. Who knows, maybe I'll actually build the rest of my family next. Anyway, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning into today's video and checking out the entire build process of the LEGO mosaics with me. I had a ton of fun building my cat and dog, Maddy and Dexter, and I'm so happy that they are going to be living in my LEGO room for many years to come. Thank you guys so much again for tuning into this video. You'll have to let me know down in the comments below what you thought, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here in the next one.